Okay. All right, we're going to go proceed to the gallery. I'm Herman of exhib and Associates. We're primarily African preservers and presenters of traditional African sculptural art. We do exhibitions and travel internationally. We now currently have 3 exhibitions on tour. This one, this is the second location for this exhibition. It initially was done at the Walt Whitman Art Center about 2 years ago. There's also the Majesty of African Motherhood. It's in its 6th city. It's now at FAMU. And there's a new exhibit we just installed last week in Massachusetts, at Worcester, Massachusetts. It's called the Symbolic Use of Hair in African Cultural Arts, also subtitled Never a Man. Okay. All of our exhibits have themes that relate, and those themes relate to the traditional material, but also the historic culture, and at the same time are contemporary in that we relate them to contemporary issues within our community and within the world community. For example, we are here in America, in the West, and one of the things that's been very clear about being in the West and being in the Western environment, mentality, dominated by ideas that nature is susceptible. There's this great breach between nature and humanity. And African people and most people around the world, particularly people of color, don't have that idea about who they are in the world. They see themselves as a part of the world, as a human person, but as a part of nature and as a part of a larger world and universe, including the flora, the flowers, the animals, the people. In fact, one of the really interesting things about African sculpture, you can hardly find African sculpture that doesn't include animals. I mean, it's interesting, even if they don't have a full animal form, there's an extended nose, a beak. There's some element either with generally on the head, or there's horns, or there's teeth from animals. There's skin from animals. So one of the things we really saw by doing this exhibit was how extensive the relationship was. Meaning, so when Africans created sculptural forms like the ones you're going to see, they basically see themselves as a part of nature to such a degree that when they represent themselves, they represent themselves in relationship to the rest of nature. Okay? And also you'll see that they don't represent themselves in an antagonistic relationship to the rest of nature, which is very important. The same thing with the environment. I mean, we're now, have major world, environmental issues, and that has to do with our, the point of view that we've accepted in the West, that there's this control and antagonism. There's a sculpture you'll see that's a seated Fanti woman, and the woman is seated bare-breasted on a leopard. It's a very powerful representation because, one, she's not in control, she's not trying to be in control, and she's very serene, which, and a leopard, is the one animal that is notorious for killing even when it's not harming, which is really unusual for animals in general. So when you look at when you think about real power, power in the African context is not one of dominance and control, it's one of harmony. So this woman is actually in harmony with nature, and in harmony with an animal that is notoriously not only dangerous, but unrestrained, okay? So that's the kind of things that this exhibition talks about. Also, it starts back in ancient Kemet. We did that on purpose. We would have done that even if the Kentuck wasn't across the street, because that's where it started. That's where the zoomorphic forms started in Africa. The idea and those relationships, and obviously in ancient Kemet, or Egypt, it was used to such an extent that as nowhere else. And the relationships that were shown were so dynamic. Also, there's a section of this exhibit that deals with the idea of the purposefulness of African art. And the purposefulness in this regard, in terms of animals, we reflect on the idea of how animals were used as metaphors, okay? So when you see the snake, for example, the snake on the head of the Yoruba mask, the Lede mask, in our society we're taught that snakes are negative, that snakes are evil. In many other societies, that is not the case. Snakes represent actually renewal in African society. They represent the idea of power that's restrained and can be, can be released. So we're talking about very different ideas about the world. Also, for me, which has been really interesting in doing the research with this, is you see how in social order, the ideas of social order within the African community are expressed through animals. A lot of the ideas, for example, we look at the monkey, and the Maoli people, the people of Cameroon, the Bamoon, the Bamaliki, the Baole, they do a lot of images of monkeys. Well, monkeys are considered to be very, and now we, through science, through experimentation, have also documented that they are extremely intelligent animals, okay? And that they are very cunning, they're very knowledgeable of the environment, they have incredible physical, tactile capacity, and so the Baole people often represent the monkeys in terms of material that they would use for containers, because they also represent protection. And they also have many offering containers that deal with offerings that also show the Baole monkey holding and receiving a container. In science, of course, when we began to do space exploration, animals were the first, animals were first used in space exploration, like dogs, monkeys, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing in testing of pharmaceuticals and so on and so forth. So another example, of course, is when the recent tsunami. When the tsunami hit, the one area where people in these remote islands were not affected by the tsunami were the people who lived in relationship to nature. They asked their elders, the animals are going to the hills, what should we do? And they told them, they said, there's something about to happen that we can't predict, but we need to follow that they are aware of it. Because, see, Africans and other people who are close to nature understood that animals had been here for millions of years, prior to the induction of so-called human species. So there's a knowledge that Africans represent both the knowledge that they have of the earth, of planting, like the Bamana people in the Chawari. They represent how the Chawari, basically came down and showed them how to farm. So it's in their myth, it's in the textiles, so it's all over. And also social order, the last thing. Social order, all of our exhibits really somehow speak to social order, because obviously we're in a society and environment that's out of order. And I mean, meaning there are no, we aren't safe in our homes, we're not safe in our communities, We don't have a sense of relationship. So there's so much that's been lost. And these things that, you know, that Africans and people from around the world connected to nature, they've had it straight, they've got it straight, they've had it straight forever. And yet in many societies where they haven't been diluted and polluted, they continue to have it straight. And so these are things that we need to get back to. These exhibits speak to that. Okay? At this point, I would like to, I'm available, you know, to review the African material, but tonight we have a special presentation. Okay. The brother is going to give you background on specifically the zoomorphic forms coming to Kemet, and he's going to, he teaches the meta-nature, and he will begin first in the gallery, and then go through and do a presentation, a sit-down presentation in room 108. Okay? All right. His name is somewhat extended, and he will interpret the full name. It's Mfundishi Jagudimas Khan Heru Hassan Hamas Salim. He is a master Kemetic scientist and priest, founder of the Golden Black International African Cultural Center. He is a world traveler and takes groups to Kemet. He is a teacher of one of our major scholars, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries. He teaches her the meta-nature. And it's so important that we have Africans who are learning in the sacred writing of the meta-nature, because this way we can get first-hand interpretation. Because, you know, a year ago or so, my organization was asked to write a book, write an article on African sculptural art and why it was important to present and preserve it for the African American community. And that was a national magazine called Black Issues Books Review. Well, we wrote the article and they asked us at the end, they said, well, would you please review books by Africans and African Americans on African sculptural art? Well, the issue ultimately was there are so few, out of maybe 2,000 books at the University of Penn Museum of Anthropology library on African art, 2,000 easily. It's hard to find 10 books written on African sculpture by Africans. They are African contributors and African commenters, but Africans have been totally, and I say Africans in the Americas have been totally negated in terms of their first-hand life, knowledge, and experience, some with double PhDs. And this weekend we had a brother, you know, who's in his late 60s, a renowned scholar. Find 2 books by him. Can't. Okay, he's a full professor at Amherst. Okay, so these are the things that we're dealing with in terms of, this material has tremendous information to offer our community, such that we are able to come out of the malaise, the social and cultural malaise that, that we're in. And, the larger society is aware of that. They're also familiar with the economic value because they control the economic value. One sculpture I guess about 8 months ago, sold for $7.5 million in a auction in which there was like 250 sculptures, 250 individual items. And that's just one piece. So that's the economic side, but the cultural side is even more powerful. I bring to you Brother Djibouti to do the presentation.
Peace and blessings to everybody. Since Brother Herman covered the zoomorphic concept so well, there's very little for me to do, so we can actually do something. Okay. Many of the concepts that he talked about is very on point and is consistent throughout the African diaspora, whether we're left the continent or on the continent. And so as you see us populate the continents, you will see some of these same zoomorphic images and concepts. And we did not look at ourselves outside of nature. Just a little background before I go any further. Okay, I'm from Tanzania. That is my homeland, East Africa. And so I had a background where there was no separation between you and nature. You know, when I tended the cows, when I tended the sheep, you were one with them. You were one with nature. You were one with the grasses, the fields. I worked in the picking tea leaves, you know, the hillsides of Tanzania, you know. And you become just one with all elements. People say, weren't you scared? There's wild animals out there. Wild animals in nature? No, we are the wild animals. Let me say that again. My father used to say, this word in the wilderness, what is that? Who said that nature was wild? You know? It's natural. You know, it's like a wild horse. A wild horse is a natural horse. After I beat him up, knock his brains out, tame him, break his spirit, right. Now he's a real horse. See, so our concept of what is wild and what is natural has been reversed. The Matrix has really done a job on reversing our spiritual concept to the universe. If you ask anyone, even my college students, to start talking about nature, they go out and start talking about the trees, and they don't talk about themselves. They've separated themselves from nature. That's the first mistake. You know, I take people on camping trips out into the woods, and every year people get lost. A couple of people here have been with me. Every year people get lost. And I'm saying, we're the only creatures that can get lost because of our separation. I said, look, the squirrel ain't lost, deer ain't lost, falcon soaring through the sky. How come y'all lost? You got PhDs, MEEDs, and you lost because you have separated yourself from the very thing that is the essence of who you are. The essence of who you are. You know, when you look out into the sky, that is an intricate part of you. That's just the macrocosm of the microcosm. And if you understand you, then you understand it. And that's man's problem. We are soaring around the galaxy, and we have little knowledge of the human being. And so therefore, we are searching in the dark blind.
Looking for life out there.
And it's here.
Right here.
Each cell is like a whole galaxy. And it's operating the same way the heavens are operating. And so it becomes important for us to have an intricate, intimate relationship with our consciousness. The system that we're going to talk about of developing, the Westerners call it the mystery system. No, it was only a mystery to those who didn't know. We didn't call it the mystery system. It was our regular educational system. We call it the exhib. Exhib. That means the study of nature. And as we go back to the room, you're going to see that when I talk about the Medu-Netra, to really explain the zoomorphic energy, you're going to see there's more animal symbols than any other symbols. And all of the animal symbols are indigenous to the African continent. And I'm going to explain just why. But if we just take a walk down just a little bit. I want to make sure that you get a chance to look at all of the artifacts and things. But I want to, okay, so there lots of figures have a nice circle around here so everybody can see this particular image. Now I'm going to break it down in greater detail. I'm going to start out by showing you some of the Medu-Netra in terms of the alphabet, the syllabic symbols, and how things were broken down. But just to give you a sneak preview of what we are talking about and what Brother Herman beautifully did, I wanted to say, do my brother, that was very well, excellent introduction. Can you just travel with me around the country? You know? Okay. All right, so what we see here is the foundation of the most misunderstood concept in all of Kemet. You see, most people in this room, even right now, have a Judeo-Christian Islamic background. One of those major religions has influenced us: Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. Maybe a few, maybe Buddhism or Taoism, but those are the major ones that have influenced most people here. And so all I got to do is tell you is that ancient Kemet had many gods, and you're like, right? Because if you you come from that background, you're told there's only one creator, right? We're not going to get into the semantics of the name, huh? But we're told there was just one force, right, that created everything. And so now in ancient Kemet, when they try to tell you that somebody said that these are many gods and goddesses, you automatically turn off. And you notice each one of those books I just talked, those systems I talked about, all of them talk about ancient Kemet in a bad way. But the foundation of all of them come from Kemet. If I talk about something really bad, are you going to try to use that as a reference? No, you're going to be trying to get away from it. Oh, that's blasphemy, that's evil, everything there, you're like moving away from that. And so therefore, the source of what I really have, you won't even take a look at. Because you've already been to, if someone says, look man, that's that house of ill repute, man, you go up in there, anything's subject to happen. You know, there's all types of stuff going up in. You might cross the street when you get there, right? Well, that's what people have done with ancient Kemet in terms of the knowledge. Now, Western world is pimping and prostituting the artifacts and the culture, but they're not telling you that this is the foundation of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, and all the other isms. It is the very foundation. Now, we talked about animals are part of nature and we're part of nature and we can't separate ourselves from them. Once you do that, you've made a big mistake. We call ourselves human beings, right? Homo sapiens sapiens. But what is that? That's a mammal, isn't it? We're an animal that can what? That have cognitive analytical thinking and can speak. That's it. So we have to be real. That doesn't... Huh? We have quantitative, and that's even debatable whether some of us have quantitative and analytical thinking, because that's not taught in school today. That's why you can be so easily manipulated. Because we need to be able to make you mass consumers, so we need to manipulate your mind. Right. I just left the Herman exhibit, right? And after you go through, boy, they got a grand, showcase. I mean, boy, they can get into your pocket. They got 10 erasers, pens, ink, toilet paper. They got everything. So they know how to. Right. They know how to get into your pocket. And so first of all, you don't separate yourself from nature. Now I'm going to go right down the list here so that you can see. This first one is input. Now, those people who've been reading the books, you're going to hear some different terminology because most of you have been educated about Egypt from the Western world. Egyptology, let me go on record. Egyptology is the study of Africa from a Eurocentric cultural perspective. And so it would be like me not knowing your culture and coming in and examining this from my perspective. Okay? As opposed to, first of all, in 1963 at the summit, UNESCO summit, when Thea Bingle and Jacques Diop went against the whole Western world, all the major Egyptologists of the world, there was 4 things on their program that they challenged all Egyptologists on. Number 1 is that this is an African culture. And then they showed artifacts throughout the whole continent and showed how this information traveled down the Nile and that everything that you can find in Kemet, I can go to South Africa and find. I can go to the Congo and find. Uganda, I can go to Tanzania, Kenya. In fact, the necklaces, all the sock, the jewelry can be found in Central Africa. Not only that, all the crystals and stones come from the interior of Africa. Not only that, all the religious paraphernalia comes from the inside of Africa, not Asia, no place else. And so he proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that it is an African culture. Number 2, that it was an African spiritual system. Religion had not been created yet. Religion is a creation of the Western world. But the spiritual system that feeds the religion was truly African and integrated into almost every nation that we see in Africa today. And again, Thea Bingle showed, even from the high priest wearing the leopard skin, you can even come here. It's amazing that the Olmecs and the Aztecs, the high priest wore the jaguar, which looks like the leopard. It's the same family. Is that a coincidence? Or are we the first people who populated the Americas? We won't get into that right now. Okay, all right, but so spiritually and culturally, Diop kicked butt. No Westerners could even come close to challenging that. Number 3, he proved that it was an African language, the Medu-Neter. An African language, first of all, showing all the glyphs coming from Africa, being indigenous African animals. Number 2, he even traced, he went to West Africa. Wolof has 40% African words straight from Kemet. Kiswahili, Mandingo. He went all the way to South Africa, Hosa, the Click. He went straight to Medu-Neter. And so the myth that Africa is all these scattered different cultures, as different as night and day, Diop chopped it away and brought it all home and showed how there is a nucleus, a center nucleus that came from the interior of Africa and dispersed throughout all of Africa, and that they have these common ingredients. Linguistic. They try to even tell you today in most universities that the Medu-Neter, who they call hieroglyphics, is Afro-Asian. Afro-Asian. It's an African language, and Diop proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. What is? We find that Arabic is an African language. Now, the confusing part that some people have is that Arabic infused an Asian culture who dominated the language. So when you learn Arabic now, you are not necessarily learning an African culture. It's an African language that's permeated with an Asian culture because people dominated and moved in and migrated there. Okay? Hebrew. Hebrew comes out of Medu-Neter. Now that is, foundation of it is an African base, but it's an Afro-Asiatic. But Medu-Neter, Diop proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, is an African language. So, now the 4th one is going to get shaky, and y'all watch what happens here. So, it's an African spiritual system, it's an African culture, it's an African language. Now the 4th thing on the agenda was that ancient Kemet was African people. And the Wazoo, the Europeans said, oh no, we're not giving that one up. They weren't black. They weren't black. They weren't African. Now, could you imagine me in France debating?
Watch it.
You know, the ancient French were not white, or go to Germany and say, no, the Germanic tribes, because I seen a black one there. I know there must have been some, black people started the Germanic. No, but we could go to Africa and talk about, so they said, so Diop took samples of the mummies.
Right.
And melanin, which give pigmentation, which is the core ingredients to human beings. You can't hear without melanin. It's the core of your eardrum. In fact, the vibration in the fluid is melanin. Your eye, you can't see without melanin. Somebody has tricked you into blue, gray eyes being more sexy and pretty. No, dark eyes have greater depth and field, and that is melanin dominated. So recessive is blue, gray, green. Dominant is brown, black. Okay? And so Diop proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. And he took mummy tissue. It takes over 10 million years for the molecule of the melanin to deteriorate. And the mummy tissue showed everyone that he took a sample of, melanin dominated African people. And so now they outlawed, you can't take no more mummy tissue, okay? All right? No more mummy tissue, can't do that no more, okay, all right. So they refused, they said, no, Diop, we disqualify that. Yes, it's an African language, yes, it's an African spiritual system, yes, it's an African culture, but they were black white people.